Welcome to today's webinar, Atomized AVM. My name is Lexi Rubin, and I'm the Marketing Director here at ATTOM Data Solutions. Here's a look at what we're going to talk about today. In a minute, I'll introduce you to our speakers and then give you a quick introduction to ATTOM data. After that, we'll get right into what you all came here for, Atomized AVM. After an overview, we'll delve more into the data that powers the AVM and the analytics that deliver the results. We're going to leave time at the end for Q&A, so please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation through the question box in your menu. I'm going to go ahead and answer a frequent question right now. Yes, we will be recording today's presentation and we'll be sending you a copy tomorrow. I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers, who have all been instrumental in developing the Atomized AVM. Excuse me. Todd Tita is our Chief Technology Officer. From our AVM partner, AVM Analytics, we have Cliff Lipscomb, Vice Chairman and Co-Managing Director, and Andy Krause, Principal Data Scientist. Also joining us today is Jeff Metcalf, the Product Manager for the Atomized AVM. So who is ATTOM? Previously known as RealtyTrack, we have evolved into ATTOM Data Solutions, where our mission is to power real estate transparency. How do we do this? Well, we've built a multi-source national data warehouse that blends property tax, deed, mortgage, foreclosure, environmental risk, natural hazard, and neighborhood data for more than 155 million U.S. residential and commercial properties. That covers 99% of the U.S. population. And with more than 29.6 billion rows of transactional level data and more than 7,200 data attributes, our 9-terabyte ATTOM data warehouse powers real estate transparency for innovators in many industries, including real estate, mortgage, insurance, technology, finance, marketing, and more. We offer a variety of data solutions. The Atomized AVM can be delivered through a number of our data solutions, including bulk data, API, market trend reports, marketing lists, and match and append. Our data is not one size fits all. Our flexible delivery options give you a choice when it comes to how you consume the data and also how much data you consume. We tailor our solutions to meet the challenges and opportunities in your industry and for your specific objectives. Now I'd like to introduce Todd Tita, our Chief Technology Officer. Todd leads our product and technology teams. He started his career with Anderson Consulting in the late 90s and has worked in real estate, data, and analytics ever since. Todd founded several startups, including VisionCore, which he subsequently sold to CoreLogic, where he then led research, development, professional services, and technology teams. Prior to ATTOM, Todd was Chief Technology Officer of Myers Research, where he led the development and launch of Zonda, a mobile analytics app targeting the new home industry. Take it away, Todd.
Great, thanks, Lexi. Hopefully everybody can see my screen here. Wanted to click down a little bit on what the actual ATTOM AVM is. And we'll start briefly, just because I know we have a mixed audience, on some of the basics. As the name implies, it's an automated valuation model. It means a piece of software estimates the value of a piece of property. Most AVMs you'll find in the marketplace work well in certain geographies or with certain property types. Some are used for lending purposes, while others are used for marketing purposes or analytics. As you can imagine, the needs of these different use cases create different opportunities in the market. What we've tried to do with the ATTOM AVM, Atomized AVM, is strike a balance between these various use cases and create an AVM that brings high accuracy and coverage to the broadest market possible. Starting with coverage, one of the key aspects of an AVM is that our AVM values over 80 million properties on a monthly basis, which is a high percentage of all the properties in the United States. We also provide historical AVMs, so think of a sort of a wayback machine that figures out the value of a property at some point in the past. This is especially important as you look at the history of a property. All of this means that when you need a value, we have one for you there. And coverage is just one aspect of an AVM. It's really also a function of how accurate an estimate you really want. Andy will talk a little bit more about our statistical modeling approach and accuracy metrics in a few minutes, but we think we're able to value a high percent of the U.S. residential property set because of our highly localized approach to the problem. Again, Andy will talk in more specifics about the analytics behind this, but 80 million with high accuracy we feel really good about. The next point I'll make is that our AVM is focused on residential real estate, and in particular on single family and condominium properties. We chose to focus here mostly because our customers focus in this area of the real estate industry, but also because AVMs simply aren't as accurate on commercial, industrial, manufactured housing, other property types that have very specific dynamics that aren't as easy to model out and require very nuanced valuation approaches. We think AVMs in particular play well in single family and condo properties, and that's where we focused. Last point I'll make on our AVM is that we focused heavily on transparency as we developed this product with AVM Analytics, Cliff and Andy and the team. This was a hole we saw in the AVM market. Most AVMs out there are very black box oriented, limited visibility into how they work, the logic in them, the valuation techniques in them, or even the data that powers them. Andy's going to talk a bit more about all of those aspects of it, but again, transparency in the model itself was critically important to us. And what you'll find in follow-up to this discussion is that we're very open to share white papers and other accuracy results with our clients, something that not a lot of AVM companies do today. Most of the folks on this call, scanning the registration list, fit into the target audience you see here on the right side of the slide. So hopefully this discussion is resonating with you, and either you have an existing use or a potential new use of AVMs or property values. Bottom line is, from traditional real estate companies all the way down to analytics companies and startups, we believe that having access to estimated values on most of the U.S. residential market, real estate market, is fundamental to the operations of your business. So we're going to click down a little bit into that and talk about where we see common use cases. Again, hopefully this resonates with the audience and you see something that is part of your business today. The way we think about use cases is really centered around the jobs that our customers do on a daily basis, using data, analytics, et cetera, to power those jobs. In the case of AVMs, that falls into what we think are 4 key functional areas of businesses that fell into the industries on the prior slide. And I'll kind of click down on each of those here now. In marketing, this is a great use of AVMs. We see customers using property value to acquire new customers, develop campaigns that are personalized and very targeted to the audience, and then simply to measure the performance of those campaigns. You guys can think that of personalized content showing the value of a property when you market to a customer, or simply using home value as a dimension of selecting which customers you want to market to. In the sales world, we're seeing a lot of innovative use of AVMs in removing customer friction from any sales process. This includes pre-filling forms out so a customer doesn't have to, pre-qualifying customers. We're also seeing AVMs used heavily in increasing sales effectiveness, really as a workflow technique and sales prioritization technique, so that the teams focus on efforts that have the most important and highest value opportunity. In operations, we're seeing property values used to drive workflow, validate risk on transactions, real estate transactions, improve quality control, a variety of what I call traditional uses of AVMs in operations. We're also starting to see other operational areas within the industries we just talked about use AVMs, including in performance management of staff. Lastly, I'll close. This is really a horizontal role that we've seen emerge in a lot of companies, and there's obviously specialty analytics companies, many of which are on this call, using property values to understand the risk of particular transactions, real estate transactions, analyze portfolios, do market research, or frankly, market selection as you look to enter new markets. AVMs become a very important piece of that as well. So moving on to some of the differentiators in this, I would say that innovating in AVMs is not an easy proposition for a couple of really simple reasons. One, valuing property goes back to the dark ages, if not before, and AVMs have been around for decades. But we think we've done something truly differentiating here, and both in the solution itself, but also in how we're taking it to market. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, these 5 points. First, Lexi mentioned that underpinning a lot of our products and solutions is a very robust data warehouse of property-centric data. I'm going to click down on that in a minute, but on what data we actually have. But we've developed a number of data management innovations over the last 15 years, including the introduction of a unique property identifier called the ATTOM ID that ties all of our data sets together to give you one picture of a property. We also vigorously validate our data using a number of quality control techniques, and in combination, all of these different data management techniques give us what we think is the highest quality data sets in the industry, something that's been confirmed by a number of our clients over the years, and something that we continue to drive as a top priority for our business. Andy is going to cover how we built our AVM model in a way that gives us the accuracy and transparency I mentioned before. So I won't steal his thunder, other than to say that in my 2 decades of experience working in real estate data and analytics, I've never seen a solution that was built from the ground up to balance accuracy and transparency. And I'm really proud to say that's what we've done, what I think we've done here. And then the last point I'll make is really around the value proposition for you, our customers, and what we think that is something nobody's done before. And that's the idea of balancing a highly accurate, transparent analytic model with pricing that lets our customers use it across their business, from marketing to analytics and all of the different use cases we covered, without being price prohibitive. And we can talk more about that with you individually as we start further conversations. Moving into the data, Lexi mentioned that would be a key piece of what we talk about. It's a key part of our day-to-day. I'll start with giving you a picture of all of our data sets, and then I'll move specifically into the AVMs, the data that powers the AVM itself. I told you how we manage data a few minutes ago, and how this drives our quality, but I didn't get into the specifics of the data, and that's what this slide really tries to do. Sort of a fun way to think about all of our different data sets. There's a lot of them. You might recognize this type of chart from elementary school, where you learned about the elements that make up the universe being in a quote periodic table. We call this slide and this image the ATTOM data table of elements, and it really shows how we think and organize all of the data that we curate. It's a nice reference card for us. There's really 4 categories, and they're listed here on the slide, and I'll click through each of those. First is property. This is our bread and butter data, a lot of the items that Lexi had mentioned earlier. We track a lot of information about individual properties, from characteristics, mortgages, transactions, listing information, ownership, foreclosure activity, history, and other location elements, really core information about a property itself is what forms this red leftmost part of the slide. I'm going to flop over to the right in the blue colored area, and this is our neighborhood data. And this is really about the area surrounding a property. You think about both hazard, from community information, demographic information, all the way down to hazard level information about a particular area. This is extremely important in a lot of different ways when you're researching properties, but certainly in in the use cases that we've been talking about. And since location is everything in real estate, when you couple this data with property data, it adds just a whole nother level of understanding of the property itself. So neighborhood being our second category of the four. Moving to the bottom gray area of this slide is what we consider our third category of data, and it's our boundary data. And this is quite interesting. It's a spatial oriented or geographic level information that represents areas. So if you think about a map and how think about a shape on a map, that is really geospatial data. And we curate a number of different geospatial data sets that are very relevant to real estate, from parcel boundaries, neighborhood boundaries, area boundaries, all the way down to zip codes and other other spatial areas. These collectively give you really a picture of the map of a property or area, including specific location information around it. And then the last category I'll cover is the green area at the top. This is derived information, so elements that we derive out of either analytic models or derivative calculations off of other data that you see elsewhere on the slide. AVMs, our atomized AVM falls into that category. That's really where you will see that. You see it as the upper left box there. And in a minute, Andy's going to talk about how we take the data and turn it into a derived or analytic data element. So taking all the other data on the slide into that. Within these four categories is the information that powers our atomized AVM. In particular, the property data, the red area that we've been talking about, is that cornerstone of the data set that goes into the AVM. And he's going to talk about how we use property characteristics, sales history, other historical data to drive the solution in the analytic model. And when you couple the data I've been covering here with the analytics Andy will cover, you get the different differentiators that we talked about. Again, transparency, accuracy, coverage being the key ones. Lastly, a quick note on why we partnered with AVM Analytics on this solution. AVM Analytics is a valuation analytics firm really focused on providing insightful and transparent solutions for a variety of customers in mortgage, capital markets, and the real estate industries. We've known Cliff and his team and Andy and the team there for many years, always respected the analytics, thought leadership, and intellect they've had. We're really excited to be working with them again on this solution, so it's been a wonderful partnership. I think when you hear Andy talk, you'll realize their depth of knowledge in the analytics space, and so it's a great partner for us on this. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Andy Kraus with AVM Analytics. He'll be talking about how we take that data and turn it into property values. Andy has a PhD in urban planning from the University of Washington and spent time as a senior data scientist at Zillow, where he worked on improving the Zestimate and improving the accuracy of that. He's now with AVM Analytics as principal data scientist and leads the team that developed and maintains the atomized AVM. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Andy.
All right, thank you, Todd. As Todd mentioned, I will be giving the technical overview of the atomized AVM today. And I'm going to focus on three components, the first being transparency and how we communicate the AVM to our existing and potential clients, the process, the steps and the thinking behind the way in which we develop the atomized AVM, and last but not least, the performance of the AVM, how well it does in terms of coverage, accuracy, and the like. So transparency. We at AVM Analytics firmly believe that data and algorithmic transparency is the way of the future. And it's not just good business practice, but it's also something that we see society, consumers, society at large, valuing and demanding as data and algorithms become a larger part of our daily life. Also at AVM Analytics, we have a number of decades of experience in what I would call contentious or litigious situations in which transparency is a requirement, not just something that we do. It's something that we have to do. So by nature, we think about things in a transparent manner. Now, there are two sides to transparency, especially in regards to developing the atomized AVM. The first is sort of the simpler or the normal level of transparency, in that we are going to fully, or that we have fully documented the way in which you produce the atomized AVM. This webinar being a good example of how we're communicating that process to our clients, potential and existing. But also the white paper that we have out, so a full explanation of those things in a white paper format. And we plan on continuing this into the future as the model grows and improves. As we add different features, we'll make sure everybody who is a existing customer or potential is kept abreast of those changes. So that's sort of the standard level of transparency. But the second one is where we think we really are offering a differentiation in the marketplace. And that is, we're offering to current and potential clients access to the model creators and maintainers, and that's our team here at AVM Analytics. So what do we really mean by access? Well, if you're testing out our AVM, or you're a current client and you have some issue, or you see a strange data point, we want to talk to you. We want you to talk to our modeling team. We're going to facilitate that, whether it be a phone call, email, whatever it is. We want to know, the questions you have, the problems you have, and we want to walk through that with you, whether it be actually going in and remodeling a property and seeing what's happening there. Why are you seeing these problems or the strange data? So we think that truly is a differentiator in the marketplace, to have that access to the people who developed and are maintaining the AVM. And we do it primarily for the benefit of the customers, but it also helps us out too. In some of our initial testing, we had clients that came back and showed us interesting things going on in certain local markets that we were then able to incorporate into our AVM. So we think it's a real win-win having this level of transparency. And we as modelers always learn something by talking to the clients. So we're really excited to offer that bridge or that conduit of information flow both ways. Moving on to the process that we took in this AVM, two key features of our process. The first is localization, and the second is resiliency. So I want to start with localization. We have at AVM Analytics and our parent firm, Greenfield Advisors, we've been valuing properties for over 40 years. Really working with tax assessors, appraisers on the ground. We have a number of licensed appraisers on staff here at the firm. So we know, as well as all you do out there, that real estate's a local phenomenon. So we designed the atomized AVM to take advantage of that and to really leverage that local information. And in doing so, our models are run at the local or sometimes even the property level, where we focus on the 15 to 100 nearest similar and recent sales transactions. And by doing that, we're able to capture the localized phenomena that are happening in a particular neighborhood and not the neighborhood next door. In addition to that, we've been able to leverage the local knowledge that tax assessors have as a proxy variable, as a sort of a stand-in in places where the traditional home characteristics may not be as strong as other places. So by limiting our models to being highly localized, and then leveraging other information that we know people on the ground there have gathered, we feel we've really been able to build a model that in some ways sees from the inside out. It starts at the property level and looks outward, instead of a large county or metro type model that's constantly trying to look inward. And so that's been our initial focus on localization. As I mentioned earlier, we use recent sales transactions, but often those transactions may be 9 months old, they may be 15 months old, sometimes even up to 2 years old if we need to go back that far. And certainly in many areas of the country at the moment, markets are moving quite quickly. So we need to adjust those sales up to current or whatever the valuation date was. As was mentioned earlier, we do offer some retro valuation services. So we need to adjust our sales to be current. And similar to the models themselves, we develop those indexes, those house price indexes, to do the adjustments at a highly localized level, often at the same level as the models themselves are run, sometimes a little bit bigger, but generally speaking, we're trying to capture neighborhood level trends, because we understand that not everything in not every property moves at the same rate that the metropolitan HPI that you might see from Case-Shiller moves. So we really want to get that down to a localized level, and we've built some specialized modules to do that at the neighborhood level. So those are two ways in which we're, again, trying to build a model that starts at the property and looks outward, highly localized model. And the second, sort of the other side of it, or the second key driver of our process is resiliency. It's not a word you often hear in relation to automated valuation models, but what we mean by that is we want our values to be stable. We don't want a single data point to push the value around. Put another way, we really want to measure trends in the marketplace, not events. So we want to make sure that while one or two sales does matter, we want to make sure that if a strange sale or an odd outlier property sells in an area, it doesn't push all of our values around. We want to make sure that they're stable or resilient to single events. We want to make sure that they're tracking trends in the market. And there are 4 ways in which we do that. The first is by building multiple different modeling approaches within our AVM. By not just relying on one, if a strange value comes out of one of the models, we have a number of other estimates to rely on. In addition to those multiple modeling approaches, we also ensemble our values, which means we add them together and weight them based on accuracy or some other estimate to create kind of a blended value. So between the multiple models that we approach and then the blends that happen over that, we have sort of a whole pool of potential estimates for a property to choose from. And the way in which we choose those is to look and say, well, which one of these is most accurate, again, in your highly localized area, focused at the neighborhood and the property level. So essentially we say, look, we ran, let's call it 6 or 7 different modeling approaches. Which of these has the best error rate in this neighborhood? That's the one we're going to use. There's sort of a voting process that occurs where each model votes weighted based on their accuracy, and whichever one has the best accuracy by votes, that's the one we use in each localized area. The second way in which we promote resiliency and stability is to use robust statistical methods. So what those methods do is they take an iterative approach and apply less weight to values that are unlike other values in the neighborhood. So essentially, we're looking and saying, are there some outliers or some strange properties, maybe a transaction here that looks like it's arm's length, but has a value that maybe doesn't fit with the neighborhood. We still certainly consider it because that is part of the market, but we may give less weight to it. And that, in a nutshell, is what our robust statistical methods do. It helps to keep 1 or 2 events from pushing our values around. We want to make sure that they're trends that are pushing them down. The third thing we do within our model to foster resiliency and stability is a process called bootstrapping. It may sound kind of complex. In reality, it's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. What we do, or what a bootstrap is it simulates alternative market outcomes. So if you just look at what happened in any given market, let's take an example of 30 transactions. We use those 30 transactions to develop a model to value a home at 123 Elm Street. That's great, but what would have happened, or we asked the question, what would happen if only 20 of those 30 sales had occurred? Well, we do that. So we simulate a different market and we value the property with those 20. Now, what happens if another 20 sell, or different 20 sell, or had sold? So we simulate that. We do that same process 500 times. So we simulate a number of different alternative market outcomes. And what we get out of that is 500 different estimates of value for the property. And we stack those in order, and we say which one is the 250 largest, which one falls in the middle. That's our estimate of value. That's our most likely estimate of that property. And what we also get from stacking those and doing all those alternative market outcomes is we look 1 standard deviation above and 1 standard deviation below, and that's how we create our forecast standard deviation and our confidence interval, our confidence score around those. And when we take those intervals, high and low, we take whichever one is largest, and we use that as our FSD. So in that way, we're being conservative in our forecast standard deviation. So we never want to overestimate our confidence or our estimate of accuracy. What we want to give you, in some ways, the most conservative estimate of accuracy that we can. So again, the bootstrapping, the whole point behind it is again to say, let's create some alternative market outcomes and see how much our value moves around. If it doesn't move around a lot by kind of swapping out those different sales, we have a lot of confidence in that. And we know that a few sales events are not pushing that value. We know that it's truly trends and actual things going on in the market that are contributing to that value. And when it does move around a lot, you as a customer will see that because our forecast standard deviations will be high and our confidence scores will be low. So that gives you some insight into how much confidence and what's going on inside the model. And lastly, if none of the above three work, the multiple modeling, the robust statistical methods, and the bootstrapping, we have a quality control procedure that says, look, even with those three, if we're not getting a quality evaluation, we're not going to produce it. We don't want to artificially inflate our coverage at the expense of producing really low quality evaluation. So we have cutoffs that say, look, if it's not of a certain quality, we're going to say we can't value that property. And last, but certainly not least, performance. So what sort of outputs does the atomized AVM produce? We have monthly runs, so every month we produce an updated value. What you get from the atomized AVM is, as mentioned earlier, a midpoint of value estimate. That's our best estimate of what that property would sell for on the valuation date. We have a high and a low value, which is sort of this, it creates this range. Those are driven by the FSD, which is driven by the bootstrapping process that I just talked about. And then we have a confidence score telling you how much confidence we have in that. Our confidence score is a direct result of the forecast standard deviation. So 1 minus our forecast standard deviation times 100 gives us our confidence score. So if we have a range of 15% above and 15% below, that gives us an FSD of 15%, a confidence score of 85. So you can be at 68% of the time, it's likely that the sales price will occur within that range. So coverage, as Todd mentioned earlier, we value on our monthly runs and provide those five values, those 5 data points for about 80 million single family and condominium homes across the US. Again, no mobile homes, no multifamily, and no luxury dwellings. And what that means is homes that are above essentially $5 million or more, or very uncharacteristic of the area in which they're found. So we've left off the $30 million beach mansions, as they're just very, very difficult to value through an AVM. And finally, accuracy. So how do we measure the accuracy of the atomized AVM? We do a 3-year, we call a rolling back test. So that means from today, look back 3 years, we go and value every sale that occurred in the past 3 years at the day before it sold. So that's what the day -1 retro valuation means. So imagine there's a sale that happened June 30th, 2016. We're going to go back, pretend it's June 29th, 2016, use only data that was available on June 29th, 2016, and create a value for that sale, and then compare it to the actual sale price to come up with their value of estimate. Looking at that day -1 retro valuations, in the past 3 years, we have about 9 million test properties that we've applied this test to. And just to sort of clarify that process a bit more, we don't use list values or list prices in that. So we're not going to be unduly biased by a list price that is known the day before the sales price actually occurs. So we're really looking at that in a true out of sample or a blind situation 1 day before it occurs. Let's predict the value and compare that to the actual sales price. In doing that, looking at our 9 million test properties, our median absolute error is around 7.5%. What does that mean? Well, about 4.5 million of those 9 million test properties will have a difference between our valuation and the sale price of less than 7.5%, and conversely, 4.5 million will be greater than that. And that varies quite a bit geographically, as you can imagine. Data quality standards and market sort of knowledge and information varies quite a bit between, say, Los Angeles and Western Kansas. So there are states and counties where those error rates are below 6%, certainly, and there are other ones, non-disclosure states in particular, where the error rates may be above 10 or 11%. So there really is a lot of geographic distinction there, purely based on market sophistication and data quality. And as customers, potential customers, we're happy to give you a little more breakdown on that. Again, that's part of our transparency. Contact Adam, get in touch with us, and we can talk through some more specifics if you're interested. So that's the 3 main points: transparency, process, and performance that really drive the atomized AVM. I will turn it back over to Lexi, and thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cliff and Andy. Now we're going to open it up to Q&A. Jeff Metcalf, our AVM product manager, has been monitoring the questions. Jeff?
Yeah, and I'm gonna pull Todd and Andy into some of these. So the first, I think, is more of a competitive question regarding the difference between atomized AVM and AVMs like Zillow and Redfin and some of the others that are out on the marketplace. And maybe Andy, you can have some perspective on this that you could share at a high level.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Jeff. I think there are sort of a number of distinguishing factors between AVMs, and the ones Jeff mentioned are sort of the public AVMs. So we call them public AVMs, Zillow, your Redfin estimate. So the first distinction is delivery. So atomized AVM, we could deliver that, all 80 million to you in a bulk file. No sort of web scraping, legal or not, it needs to be done to gather values at that level. You can get the data through an API. So the atomized AVM is going to give you sort of consistent month by month delivery options that fit within your workflow. The second would be intent and purpose. What ATTOM is focused on and what the atomized AVM is focused on here is really delivering sort of unbiased estimates to our customers. Now, it's not to say the other ones are biased, but in terms of a business model, atomized AVM is intent on giving you the best AVM value, regardless of whether you're a buyer, seller, or advertiser, whatever that is, and delivering that to you each month. Companies like Zillow and Redfin, they obviously make their money a different way. So their intent or their purpose may be quite a bit different. And part of that's the reason why Zillow offers values on 105 to maybe it's 108 million properties. They want to value mobile homes and multifamily dwellings because it drives traffic to the website, and that's great. That's what Zillow is doing. That's a service for everyone. That's not what the atomized AVM is trying to do. We're trying to provide the most unbiased estimates to provide to customers through a variety of very useful delivery methods. So Jeff, I see that as one of the big distinctions: delivery and the purpose to which the AVM is being built.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andy. Todd, if you're still on the line, are able to chime in on this one. So this relates to incorporating atomized AVM with things like current sales comps and possibly other data. And I know that we've identified some really good transactional use cases, but it's specific around those types of transactional use cases and creating meaningful experience for customers.
Sure, I am on the line, Jeff. So absolutely. So the question I think you're asking is, how do we combine property values with other data that is indicative for our clients of either risk or even that marketing concept I talked about. A good example of that is we have a number of clients that take our AVM valuations and use them as teaser content on websites, on mobile apps, and then from there create an experience to a consumer that clicks down into deeper information about a property. So it might be comparable sales, it might be the historical transactions on that. It could be as deep as ownership information, but it's used typically as a lead-in data point in a marketing or content-oriented application, and then follow on that with deeper and more layered information about the property. I think we see that very heavily in the real estate portal space. We see it in the mobile app space. You'll see it in kind of the emerging real estate tech space or platform space where folks are building workflow solutions and maybe using an AVM for pre-qualification and then clicking into some of those same data points I just mentioned. So I think those are probably the most relevant use cases for that question, Jeff.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess kind of relating to that and associating it to data, and this is more of a historical question, but there's a question about how far back the AVM goes and getting retro. So maybe, do you want to talk to that a little bit, or Andy, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a function of the data. So we probably need to follow up with that, whoever asked that question, really on the specific geographic areas they're talking about. But our data goes back into in some cases into the 80s. So it's going to be really specific to the area and the coverage that our history has. My just this is not a non-analytic answer to the question, frankly, or non-modeler answer to the question, but there's a use or value of valuations that having a valuation 40 years ago isn't as valuable to a lot of use cases. There might be some nuanced use cases that might need that, but we feel really confident that our data and our coverage gives you everything you need for 95+% of the uses of AVM. So, Andy, do you want to add to that in any way?
Yeah, sure, Todd. So standard delivery through API and bulk files right now goes back to July 2017. But as Todd mentioned, the model has been built to allow those retro valuations. And in fact, as you probably picked up on, we do a lot of those retro valuations for accuracy testing, back into the early 2010s and before that, if necessary. So, as a customer, if you're looking for those type of retro evaluations, reach out to your sales contact. We certainly have the capability and the data to go back that far, and are happy to do so.
Okay, great. Andy, I think that this one's probably I'm gonna let you answer it. It has to do with properties that are in areas where the land values are rising, but improvements are not representing the highest or the best use. Can you give a little bit of perspective on that? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and certainly in many areas of the country, we're located in Seattle here, and I think that statement applies to probably about 1/3 of the homes in the city. So the atomized AVM as is values properties at their current highest and best use. So we're going to provide a value for that residential, let's call it your single family home on the 6,000 square foot lot at that use. Purely, and the reason for that is that's what our sales transactions represent, and that's the easiest thing, or not the easiest way, but the most accurate and way to do that on scale. So we are not in some ways providing that development value or the underlying land value at the highest and best use. It's really a localized phenomenon that depends heavily on zoning regulations and a number of other things, and we do not do that in the atomized AVM. So what you're getting out of the atomized AVM is the as is, as a single family residence, as a condominium use, the value in that use. So very good question, thank you.
And so
Jeff, I could.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one additional point, but I think this gets back to your question around combining evaluation with additional data. For those of you on the call, ATTOM publishes regularly market level and zip code level statistics around investment activity, flipping activity, foreclosure activity, et cetera. So we have a number of other data sets and reports that can really get localized to kind of the broader redevelopment trends that might be happening in particular areas. And when you combine that with a current valuation, it really helps drive both asset selection or potential opportunities for redevelopment or market selection. And that's something that we see a lot of our clients using these data sets together to do. So just wanted to add that in, Jeff.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, Andy, are you trying to respond to that?
Nope.
No. Well, but maybe, and this comes up also in customer, at least client calls that I've had, and that I know others have had, that relates to AVM trends or forecasting. And can you kind of respond to that a little bit, Andy, and sort of clarify what we have and why we don't do that?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I believe the question is, do we provide forecasts? And the answer is, at the moment, no. And forecasting market values can be very difficult. especially as we don't necessarily know what interest rates are going to do in larger macroeconomic trends. So we're always very cautious in thinking about forecasting house prices as economists and data scientists. It's always a tricky situation to get into. And at the moment, we're not providing those, simply because the difficulty in both verifying the accuracy of it, and it's very hard to give a confidence score or some sort of forecast standard deviation. It's very hard to read out difficult or low quality forecast because it's essentially unknown and there's nothing to train against or test against. So that's the reason that forecasting is so difficult and something we're not doing here at the time.
Great. Here's one for you, Andy. What is the software the AVM was built on?
Oh, sure. So it's the algorithms and the modeling itself is built on the R statistical language, which I'm sure a number of you are familiar with. It's an open source language that has a number of contributors all over the world. So for instance, some of our robust statistical packages are those that are derived from the newest and most updated techniques that have been published in the academic literature. So by using an open source package such as R, we're able to sort of stay abreast of where the statistics and data science community is moving, the freshest models and those that are really high performance in terms of both accuracy and speed in doing this valuation. And then internally it runs on the SQL and other stack that ATTOM uses to store and manage all of their data.
Great. And Andy, during your part, you mentioned that we go back sometimes as far as 2 years for sales comps, and I know that we take that and we project it forward into current year using HPI market trends by zip. Can you talk a little bit about our philosophy for doing that and how that affects the accuracy?
Yeah, sure. I talked a bit about that if you remember on the localization slide, but I think I need to be more clear, so thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so for each, when we go into pick a property and we're developing a model for that property and we choose the nearest 15 to 100 sales, obviously we want all those sales to represent the current time because that's when we're valuing that property. So what we do is we're using a localized index to adjust those values, and an index that operates, as Jeff mentioned, the zip code or sometimes even smaller than that if we have enough sales to estimate an index with just the 6 or 7 blocks around it, say there's been a lot of activity. So in that way, we're able to pick up on the fact that certain neighborhoods in your city may be moving much more quickly than other neighborhoods. And that also ties into an earlier question, sort of about what development value and how do I know that land values are changing? That's often expressed by those localized indexes. Now, it doesn't cover the full development potential of a property, but it certainly gets to that, hey, neighborhood X is doing a lot better than neighborhood Y in terms of appreciation. Our highly localized adjustments allow for that to be picked up in the model.
Okay, so we've got a few hardball questions that are starting to roll in. These are kind of exciting, so we'll see how we do here. So in your segment, and I'm kind of hitting you with a lot of these, Andy. But you said that the model will grow and improve, and there's some curiosity around how that, are the current values stable? Will adjustments to the model make significant adjustments to the values? What's the impact there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, so the current model is stable. We've been running tests for about a year on that. And what we see in the future is just trying to add different models to the ensemble approach that we have. And again, through the transparency, we're going to be very clear about when a new model is added, the impact that it has. One test we do every month is compare all 80 million values from one valuation to the next. And we'll be reporting how much those values change. Current customers, especially if you're focused on a certain area and there are large changes, that's something that you can be alerted to. Let us know if that's something that you'd want to know. But generally speaking, this model is developed to be resilient because we're running all of those different models, and because of the bootstrapping process, small improvements to the code or small sort of fixes or even changes in the data quality in terms of getting better aren't likely to have a huge push on values. So again, resiliency is something we want. We understand that a lot of customers use this data to track values over time, so we don't want large discontinuities in how those values occur.
Okay, great. So here's another one. I have a 100,000 portfolio. Can the system scale to run that batch? How long would it take to create estimated values? So I'm assuming this is over API. Yeah.
Let me take that. This is Todd. Let me take that question. So, just for context, we run over 1 billion AVMs a month, and if you think about what Andy said, within there, that's we're running 500 or 600 different simulations per model there. So, or per property, excuse me. So we're running a lot of valuations every single month. We've built both the model and the platform that surrounds this to scale with our clients. We have load tested and performance tested the API platform that a lot of our customers use to access AVMs, and that we're really comfortable. We service hundreds of millions of transactions a month on those platforms. So we're really comfortable with the load, any load that our clients can throw at us. And, you know, if there's specific use cases or specific, you know, integrations that some of you are thinking about, please reach out to your rep. We can talk specifics. I'm happy to jump on a call and talk through what our technology platform looks like to support that. But we're absolutely confident we can service nearly or really any load. Many of our clients are the largest portals that are out there, so we feel really comfortable we can service most of the use cases that we've seen. So, but happy to talk through that in specifics if anybody needs follow up on it.
Yeah, good. And Todd, this kind of, I mean, well, this doesn't relate to the number of transactions, but when you were on the periodic table, you talked at length through the different types of data that we've got. And there's a question about whether we factor in things like Whole Foods, malls, crime, school data, some of the other neighborhood data as it really into the AVM model. And if so, and there's another question about how we would define neighborhoods. So how do you can you patch those together?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to let Andy answer what goes into the model question around neighborhood data, but I think the question, your secondary question there was around do we envision integrating that in? I think it's a function of us testing and validating that it has lift. You know, you could really add all of our data sets into evaluation or to an analytic, I should say. And it may make the model even more complex with very little lift. So we're very judicious about what we have in the model today and what we would add. Andy, if you could add in a little bit about the specific neighborhood, any neighborhood level data today that you're thinking about for the future, or that you might find as valuable.
Yeah, sure, Todd. So I guess to answer the question directly in the beginning, we don't sort of initially or on the surface, you know, put a Whole Foods proximity into the model or crimes in school. We take a different approach that's indirect, and that we let the data tell us that answer. So rather than trying to say, well, we know that malls influence value, why don't we just let the data tell us whether or not they do? And the way we're able to do that is through the highly localized modeling approach that we have. If in a certain area we see that malls are actually influencing prices or influencing values, and the way they do that is through sales prices, that's picked up in the model because we're only using those localized data sets. So in some ways, rather than trying to guess which of the Whole Foods, malls, you know, crime schools, 100 other things, all features which ATTOM has in the data set, in trying those out and building a very, very complex model that might overfit and have other issues, we've taken a different approach to say, let the data tell us that by running highly localized models. run those models, bootstrap them 500 times, do a lot of resiliency testing on those models. And when an influence like a Whole Foods or a location like Whole Foods has an influence, we'll see it in the sales data, and that will push up values in that area. In sort of addition to that, what I mentioned earlier is that we also rely on changes in some of the tax assessment information as well as assessors are picking up on things, and as those relative levels of assessment vary over space, we check to see if that has any lift, as Todd mentioned. You know, at the end of the day, we're letting market transactions, the actual sales out there, drive what we put into the model and what we don't.
Wonderful. Well, there are more questions, but at this point, I'm going to wrap up the Q&A. What I would say is that if you've got more questions or you'd like to get deeper into talking about how Atomized AVM can work in your business model, what it does, or you want to get myself or Andy on the phone, we can certainly coordinate that through your rep, so reach out to your rep. And with all that, I will hand it back to Lexi. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Just a few quick resources before you leave us today. Please visit our website at attomdata.com for more information on the Atomized AVM, as well as our data elements, data management, and data solutions. We also have a newsroom on our website where you can read articles on market trends, case studies, and more. You can also subscribe to our news and event updates there. For more information about our partner, AVM Analytics, please visit their website at avmanalytics.com. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about any of our data and solutions, or specifically the Atomized AVM, please either reach out directly to your Atom representative, or if you don't know who your representative is, please visit the Contact Us page on our website at atomdata.com. Then just fill out the form and one of our data experts will get in touch with you right away. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation.